generally digital campaigning gives populist messaging and populist method a slight edge.
I'm Eric Wilson, managing partner of Startup Caucus, the home of campaign tech innovation on the right. Welcome to the Business of Politics show. On this podcast, you're joining in on a conversation with entrepreneurs, operatives, and experts who make professional politics happen. Our guest today is Armin Petschner-Multari, a digital campaign expert based in Berlin. He is the founder of The Republic, a think tank promoting center-right policies in Germany. In today's episode, we're digging into the recent European Union elections and what campaigners here in the U.S. can learn. Armin, let's start with a quick background for our U.S. audience. The 27 member countries of the EU all participated in the June 9th elections with approximately 450 million eligible voters and a total of 705 seats in the European Parliament up for grabs. Given this unique transnational election, what issues were driving the campaigns, and are there broad continental issues, or are they more specific to the individual countries?
I think generally in the past it was true that there were very individual issues to the member states. In the last elections, the ones before that, it was, for example, Germany was climate. It was like the great time of Greta Thunberg, where all these issues came up. And so the German public overwhelmingly shifted to the Greens, right, which had a very strong result in the last election. This election circle, however, I feel as a trans-European issue, it is migration. And we have a shift to the right, to the traditional center-right, also to like right-wing populist parties, but also to the far right. All these parties did really well. Traditional center-left parties were in parts annihilated. That is certainly true for Germany. The Greens in Germany lost. But, you have like people like Giorgia Meloni in Italy, Le Pen in France, all these are figureheads that have not been around last time, and there has been a definite shift to the right, and that is largely based on migration. But we also have like an overreaching issue with the European Parliament and European institutions, which is something that's called the democratic deficit, right? So there's like Euroscepticism. You vote for a parliament that is not a real parliament, not everyone gets the same seats. And the European Commission is sort of set up by the heads of government of the member states. So this is all like a little bit of disenfranchisement by European voters. So that's also like a underlying tone that is part of every European election.
So it's almost, as an outside observer, it seems like it's more of a non-binding referendum on the direction of the continent. Yes, there are certain things that they can do, but really it's more of a turnout is based on people who really care and are passionate about some issues. But at the end of the day, the member nations are still going to do what they're going to do.
That's basically right, yes. And the European Commission has its live. I mean, it's a very cynical view of it, unfortunately. But I hold that one. I have a degree in European Union studies, so I started as someone who really believed in Europe, and I was like, there's room for improvement. But because the impact of the European Parliament and in a sense also the European Commission, because by the end of the day, the member states still have the most to say, is in a sense limited. It is very much a symbolic election in part. It's a very cynical view, but in parts. So it is historically, especially in some of the old member states, a protest vote. If you really want to show that you're not happy with your current national government in Germany or France or in Italy, you tend to vote for a party you would not necessarily vote for on a national level.
So it's kind of like a freebie in that regard.
It's like the midterms, like you vote a president in and then you switch because you're not happy with him, and then his party is the majority. So it's like it's a warning.
Okay, that's
sign.
a good way to put it.
Basically.
So I want to dig into more of the politics and campaigning here. So within the European Parliament, you have some major political groups. It's not right to call them a political party, but you do have the center-right European People's Party. The center-left has the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats. There's some centrist groups, Greens groups. How do these factions organize their campaigns across the member states of the EU?
That is also another tricky issue because that shows the fragmentation of the European Parliament, which is why it's more like a collection of individual actors rather than like a united front, But there are, let's have a look at the European People's Party because that's where I am based and organized in. So you have in Germany, for example, the CDU and the CSU, the Christian Democrats and the Christian Social Union, who run their own national campaigns. However, they also have a budget that they give the European People's Party, who will then have, let's say, a Spitzenkandidat campaign, in that case, Ursula von der Leyen. But they are not necessarily all bound together. There's like a loose form of cooperation, but there's not a centralized effort. The Bavarian conservatives or the, Italian conservatives or the French conservatives, they run the campaign they want to, no matter what the EPP says. But the EPP will still make sure that they organize, for example, all the debates in Brussels, or if Ursula von der Leyen comes and visits like a rally somewhere in Sweden, they organize the logistics for that. So they have their own budget. However, the member state parties are relatively independent, and they also all have their own chairman with their own agenda. So what people really do not like is when someone from Brussels tells them what to do.
It sounds like, having worked on campaigns in Europe, that is the most American part of European campaigns, when you have the more localized organizations running the show, despite the best efforts of a top-down centralized authority.
Oh, totally. They can also run like completely opposite narrative, right? Like Ursula von der Leyen says the Green New Deal was a good thing and we want to continue in a sense, even though she tones it down. And you could have member parties who are absolutely opposing it and will run a campaign against it. And then you have sort of like people within the same party family that are supposed to support each other. But everyone basically does what they think works best to turn out the votes that they see, their vote.
And so within that, what are the most important strategies and tactics that the parties, either at the continental level or the national level, are using to reach voters? Is it TV advertising, door knocking, traditional media, something else?
Then depends on the traditional campaigning methods and efforts of the member states. For example, this time door knocking was not a thing in Germany. It wasn't the last two federal elections. It was a new thing that we had a look at, in America as well as in the United Kingdom, and they developed an app for that. That was not around. What is usually for Europe, because Europe is, first of all, a very complex issue, but also you have a fragmented, media in Europe. You don't have like one European news outlet that every European voter watches, right? Because someone in Bulgaria will not understand the talk show in Germany the same way that some other topic or, a local politician from Spain will have no impact on a German debate. So there are some for like an intellectual audience, for like some hardcore politics fans. There are some debates that
and
are
that's like the leaders' debates.
Yes, exactly. So they are like the leaders' debates, basically very much like when you have like an American primary, you have too many people on the stage and nobody has enough time to say anything of importance. And this will then have a spillover into national media. So traditional media as gatekeeper, as someone who explains something, as someone who maybe translates, as someone who, shows some guide, provides some guidance, is very relevant in European elections. Apart from that, what is also still relatively big and important is these really big billboards in Europe that people put up, right? Which is like, was that for, or our candidate for. Usually it's like it's usually a message of like, we represent you well in Brussels. We have your interests at heart. We are the good guys. We take care of you. So this is something as well. And digital was not that significant in Germany. If you have a look at the party budgets, and digital advertising or so on was like a secondary issue. And as I said, it was a lot of national debate. So what really turns out vote is bringing up some issues that people feel very dear to their heart at home. So in Germany, what the CDU, for example, did is they launched an email campaign where people would, sign up to a website and then vote about the ban of the combustion engine by the European Commission, which is an issue that is very important to a car manufacturing country like Germany, right, where we have like around 1 to 1.5 million jobs in that industry alone. So that is something. But, there's not actually like a campaign that turns out people. It's just more something to create headlines. So I would say traditional media is still the most important driver of debate when it comes to European elections.
You're listening to the Business of Politics show. I'm speaking with Armin Petschner-Multari about the recent European Union elections. What layer of complexity, Armin, does the different languages have into how the party could? Is there kind of like a lingua franca of European campaigning, or is it localized?
It's English, but that is more like on an operational level. And apart from that, everything needs to be translated into the respective language. I mean, like usually Ursula von der Leyen or some of the other Spitzenkandidaten, they have like a Twitter account in English and French, Italian and Spanish and German. So that is, that's usually what's going on. You usually have in the European campaign, which is more, we make it sound like it's a campaign. It's more like a big board, of advisors. That's how I would describe it. You have someone from every country, someone who's aware of everything, who picks up on trends, who knows how to translate the messages. So that's more what it is like. So that's English, definitely. I feel also Brussels in general is run in English and not in French or anything anymore. But as I said, since the member states basically run their own campaigns, the most important messages and features and developments happen in their language. And maybe sometimes the centralized Brussels team can tag along, but it's usually the party headquarters, since they also have the budget, unlike the European campaign.
And I imagine it's a pretty good dry run for the next upcoming national elections. To that end, were there any new trends in digital campaigning or technology that emerged during the campaign?
There are a few trends, right? There is, right now we see that the far right is extremely strong on TikTok, and that sort of the establishment parties really don't have the same sort of community. So that is something we've been aware of for a while, but this time in the European election, we just couldn't really see it, right? Because if you have a look at all the key figures, then they just outperform us. And there is definitely a trend that goes hand in hand with that development. There are political debate, and there are some, communities, group, individuals, narratives, debate that happen under the surface, right? In messenger groups, on platforms like TikTok, that were sort of like not in the focus of traditional political operatives. And we are just aware that, these things develop sort of like a life on their own now. For example, the youth vote, the AfD, so the German far-right party, was the strongest, right, with 18%, which was very surprising to a lot of people. Not to me, but to a lot of people it was very surprising. Why do young people vote for the far-right? So that can in parts be attributed to their way of communicating with young people. I also think it's the issues. If you go to high school in Germany these days, you might be in a minority as a German in some parts of the country. So obviously it has an impact on your voter behavior. But, there's the AfD really takes care of young people, how to communicate with them. They have people who have the abilities, and how they build their content, how they structure their content, calendars, and so on. So they're very good at that. So that's definitely one trend.
I want to dig in on that a little bit, Armin, before we go into the next trend, which is, my sense is that these, we call them insurgent parties, whether they're on the right or the left, have fewer structures or gatekeepers in place. And so as a result, they don't have to check with as many members of the party or members of European Parliament, because they're they're new-ish. And so they're more free to kind of do these things, embrace content or strategies that might be off message, using air quotes there. Is that the sense, or do you think it was just the established parties were unwilling to engage on those platforms and were focused elsewhere?
It's a mix of both, right? Because generally the AfD, but also like the new, there's a new left party in Germany founded by a former member of the post-communist party here. These parties on the fringe, tend to have a very strong digital reach and following, right? Because like if you're dissatisfied, who comments, who signs up to open the digital page and so on? It's like people who are not happy, people who look for something new, people who are like, exactly, who look for like migrant people for support. So that has always been the case. So yes, I guess there is less stakeholders that you need to please. And I feel generally it's always easier to run a campaign as the opposition than to do it as government. And when it comes to like, having a free hand of what you can try out or what not. Because it obviously makes a difference if the chancellor's TikTok account makes a mistake or some nobody, because you're also differently in the spotlight. And that definitely helps. That's just my personal theory. I cannot really back that up. But I would say that generally digital campaigning gives populist messaging and populist method a slight edge because it caters to the logic of the platforms, right? In right to engagement, shareability, and so on. So these people always have a slight edge. But I think this time it was their ability to message effectively on platforms and, have sort of like people who are digital native running these campaigns, also like have members of European Parliament who are digital natives, because all these people basically had to start from scratch. They're not in the traditional media, so they have to look for other sort of ways of communicating with
necessity is the mother of invention.
Plays in there. Exactly. Absolutely. And then also they have a message which is migration that just really rings through with everyone now.
What are some other trends that our listeners here in the US should be aware of on the digital and tech side of campaigns?
I think what we now also have is like a lot of like fake, a lot of AI that is not done by the parties itself, but by their, by their underbelly, right? That is not really identified as official party members. Sometimes it's like a Twitter account that doesn't even have like a proper name or something. But what you will see is something that will happen to the Biden campaign. It's like, it doesn't even need to be a fake. It's just call it very hard, selective, bias negative campaigning, right? So it's like Joe Biden wandering off somewhere into nothingness. And that snippet will just be clipped out, uploaded by someone on Twitter, or made out, they turn it into a reel, and everyone will see that. That's just something that will happen. What will also happen is that people will, with the help of AI, slightly change statements, right? We see that, for example, with the Green Party in Germany, which is really hated by some, that sentences that are, statements that are sort of true or slightly altered, so you can't really tell, unless you've seen the original, whether it's a right or a wrong statement, but it will definitely give it another spin or another twist. And that by the time people figure out that this is not actually what happened, 3 hours is a long time, and hundreds of thousands of people will have seen it. I think that's something. And once these things are like in messenger group, like WhatsApp, which is a big part, and where people send each other, have you seen this? Oh my God, I can't believe that. And this is also something we can't really monitor at all.
That's that dark social media.
Yes. It's not also like negative. Sometimes it's just funny stuff, right? Like making fun of people can be a very effective way of campaigning, right? If you ridicule it doesn't even need to be in a mean or harsh manner. It's just like, if you want to show that your opponent is not capable or not the right person, you just show them stumbling up or down some stairs, right? I mean, it's something from America, and it's very effective. And the more, like the Joe Biden example is I feel like very, very, very obvious, because you cannot argue, with a meme or a video of someone talking gibberish, because it is so very self-explanatory that it will be very difficult to counter it with a sort of political message.
Right. And I think
like
that's something that's come up a lot in our conversations here about AI in campaigns. I think a lot of people are afraid of deep fakes, but we rightfully point out that cheap fakes, the selective editing or slowing down a video, which requires less skill and time, is still really effective. It's such that people don't have to go to the time and expense of making things up.
Totally. Or you just cut the second half of a sentence off and it has a completely different meaning. And, that's
right.
what will be spread.
Aside from the deep fakes and AI generated imagery, do we see any other interesting applications of artificial intelligence in the EU elections?
Not yet, because I would say Europeans in general are more risk averse when it comes to new technology, and AI has like this label of being a little bit dodgy or something. Where I think AI is rather important is in the logistical and organizational, approach to things. Spell check, getting a quick message out, having 40 variations of a different post. This is what AI probably does very well. And this is also where it has been used in the European election. When you need something translated into, let's say, French, and you don't have a French speaker at hand at the moment, or you try to do A/B testing with different messages and so on, AI can definitely help you come up with different variations. So this is, I feel like, where AI is already really big in politics. Sometimes, people let AI help them with their speeches, with their messages. Some people let them write a script. So that's definitely something where it plays a part. Do we have AI created images in politics or, AI altered content? Have I seen any of that so far here? No. And if they do it, it's more like a gimmicky use of it. So people can say, oh, we've used AI now, and then someone writes an article about it, talking about how very advanced and progressive this kind of campaign is. But that is more it. We will see that also. I feel like that's also something for the fringe parties and their underbelly where people do that, right? Also with like little fakes or something, or you have a news story. Let's say it's a knife attack, then you will have an AI generated image for shock value. So then it's definitely where it plays a role. But like this big AI revolution where all the parties lean into new technology, I have not seen that yet.
I suspect that's going to be the headline coming out of 2024 here in the United States, is everyone's looking for the big Terminator to sort of take over campaigns. But the reality is going to be those boring, mundane use cases, like you said, of transcription, of copywriting and things like that. Well, my thanks to Armin for a great conversation. We'll include a link to his organization in the show notes so you can go check that out. You know that all we ask is that if this show made you a little bit smarter or gave you something to think about, please share it with a friend or colleague. They'll learn something and you'll look smarter in the process. More people find out about the show. It's a win-win all around. Remember to subscribe to the Business of Politics show wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. You can also sign up for updates on our website at businessofpoliticspodcast.com. With that, I'll say thanks for listening. See you next time. The Business of Politics show is produced by Advocacy Content Kitchen, a media production studio.